So, despite all tariffs, China's export volume hasn't really changed. But on one hand, you can say they are replacing the US with other countries. But on the other hand, we see a big movement of transshipment and a way to use third party countries, especially Vietnam, as a way to bypass tariffs, as having still the US as a final destination. But this has been a subject of a huge proxy war that is going on and will affect liquidity and also create volatility in the market. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. So first off, let's talk about this movement. So especially when you see the exports to the US, so directly they have fallen and 43% year over year in May. So $15 billion decline in trade value. But the total exports actually jumped 4.8% during the same period. So this is interesting. It suggests how a lot of the exports here have been rerouted via Vietnam. So, and of course, it's not something that went completely undetected by Trump at all. But you see other countries also being subject of the transshipment route. So you see here on the top left how in the U.S. The direct volume has dropped sharply, but you see Indonesia exactly the opposite. You see Malaysia going up. You see Singapore just spiking. So Singapore is one of the biggest hubs on earth by itself. Thailand as well, and of course Vietnam. So Robin Brooks is a great source of all of those trade data. He has a lot of criticism about how these countries are being used as transshipment routes to bypass orders. And so that's why we see a huge movement coming from Trump, threatening not only BRICS and all of these anti-American policies, according to him, and it makes a lot of sense why you see Vietnam just settling for a 40% transshipment tariff. So this is a cat and mouse kind of game that will create a lot of friction. We have a world that is de-globalizing, but it does not mean that it's just completely shrinking. It just means that it is rearranging in a way that it doesn't really matter. It's not about getting the most efficient way of producing things or getting a just-in-time kind of assembly line, but really just getting into kind of a feudal system, a neo-feudal system, where you have those small blocks of countries that like each other, that geopolitically speaking, because geopolitics, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on your stance on it, are getting or literally trumping the macroeconomics. So, but before we jump into the details of those, of course, it's so difficult to explain everything on a single video like that. We try to give you bits and pieces, but if you really want to dive deep, this is exactly what we talk about. What we do talk about in our Bitcoin intelligence report. So we just released report 19, which is an amazing one. So we talk about tariffs, we talk about everything that's going on, transshipment, but especially what happens to Bitcoin, what happens to liquidity, what happens to all of the markets. We have plenty of charts, plenty of stuff for you to have a look. So links are on the description, but please make sure to use the promo code as well for 5% off your subscription. So let's dive back onto it. One interesting thing as well is that we're not only talking about China. So it's not really only about China, but it's a worldwide movement, because right now, if we don't have a peaceful, globalized world as before, a cooperative world, we do see the same kind of movement of transshipment happening from Europe towards Russia, for example. Exactly the same thing. And Germany, which is actually where Robin Brooks is based in Frankfurt, he's extremely critical of that, because you have the narrative that we have a whole lot of boycott happening towards Russia because of the Ukraine war. And you see so many countries doing exactly the same transshipment strategy, especially Kyrgyzstan. So if you see here, these are the exports from Germany to Kyrgyzstan, and this vertical line is basically when the war started. So you see a huge explosion, and of course, it has nothing to do with fundamentals of the Kyrgyzstan economy, but just a way for them to get those goods bypassing whatever boycott you see in Russia. That's why you see so many YouTubers, for example, going to Russia and showing, look, supermarkets are full. We have food. We have everything here. Of course, you still have the SWIFT system being blocked over there, and many problems with the visa transfers. That's why they're pushing a lot of the narrative of de-dollarization, but still, they are still able to get those dollars from other banks, the same way the Eurodollar system actually came to fruition in the first place. So you find your way out. That is a theme that is going to be more and more recurrent, and this will create some turbulence, especially short term, in what comes to inflation expectations. So it's going to be interesting to see the next FOMC meeting basically saying, look, we have more uncertainty. We're still waiting on the data. This is going to be inflationary. We cannot cut rates yet. And the pressure is just going to mount more and more, because geopolitics are just getting in a way of macroeconomics, or even more. Macroeconomics is just becoming a small part of the grand macro strategy, where geopolitics trumps everything else. So this is literally what has been happening. I also found a pretty interesting article that you can have a look. I'm going to put the link in the description for you to see, that talks exactly about that. So it really shows the state of globalization in a way that is very different from what we had before. So if you show here, basically the point is that we're not, instead of retreating, we are actually rewiring, because the geopolitics are just providing a new way for countries to reorganize themselves, and not only just totally deglobalize and now where everything is going to be local economies, because there's no way out of that. We already are in a way that countries cannot survive if they're not cooperating with other countries. So it's not that it can just unwind everything now all of a sudden. But at the same time, since we have those shocks coming in, and this is going to be used more and more as a weapon, especially from the United States and China, one as a provider of dollars and the other one as a supplier of goods, right? So this is the war, the trade war that we currently have. And countries in between are going to need to choose. Who are they going to side with? And we also have the whole BRICS conference that is happening right now in Rio de Janeiro. I'm going to be talking about that as well, which is pretty interesting, since they talk about the same things over and over again, even though we don't have anything more concrete to share. But the idea is there. So you have a reorganization of many countries trying to find their way through that. And especially now with technology, it creates what they call a divergent acceleration. So it's not a retreat, but it's a messy acceleration that you don't really know where it goes, especially when you have one tweet just says, look, Japan and the US are together and now they're no longer allies, and now maybe India is, maybe China has a trade deal. So a lot of uncertainty there that can for sure bring some turbulence to the markets. But again, I would see that more as an opportunity than anything else, because it doesn't matter what happens. So even if you have this kind of turbulence into commerce, liquidity is still going to flow, has to flow, because the only way to kind of fill the gaps is by creating more fiscal deficits. There is no way out. And the United States also said that they will have to outgrow the debt. So you can't really separate the one from the other. So interesting times, very interesting times. But of course, let's see what happens from now on. What are the responses from the countries? If we have a new list of people, of new countries having somewhat a more permanent trade deal, but this just makes 2025 as a new era for macroeconomics, but also for capital flows and international commerce. So hope you like this video. See you on the next one.